We were listening to Alan Watts, and this is actually on YouTube, so it's a 4-hour stitch together of his various talks. Personally, I was never into Alan Watts. I just rediscovered him, and he's really a fabulous speaker, public speaker and a clear thinker, so I've been quite impressed with him. The topic that he finished on is the topic that we're starting on today, which is the topic of consciousness. So,
Buddhism, meditation, and now it's only 5.
right. You need less sleep. But how many naps do you take? You rarely take a nap, right? You're pretty busy. Yeah. Part of that is just getting older, right? You know, the older you get, the less sleep that you need. Interestingly, the older you get, the happier you get. The research seems to show that. Is that true? I'm looking around for old people. Yeah, I think they get more grumpy and more cantankerous and more opinionated, but they're happier with that. So she's saying that in doing the meditation, you can sometimes attain to a state of relaxation. It's interesting that the awareness or the witnessing mind becomes aware of that state of relaxation, which is a really important point. And then you don't want to meditate, you just want to be in that state, which is exactly right. Your instincts are taking you in the right direction. The meditation should get more and more simple, more and more easy as you do it. Okay? Not more and more complicated. So I mentioned last week that we have this process of investigating Dharma, Dhamma Vicaya. And there's a lot of Dharma to investigate. We investigate suffering, we investigate non-self, we investigate root causes of feelings. There's thousands of teachings and things that we can investigate. And the more you do Dharma, the more we throw out these kinds of teachings. But the actual practice should be getting more and more simple. And when everything stops still, allow that to happen. Sometimes people, their mind stops still and then they say, I should be watching my breathing. So they come back and they try to breathe a bit harder, which is the wrong way to go. If everything stops, allow it to stop. Now, when everything stops and you allow it to stop, what usually happens is you stop. And the you means that you're caught up in that state of mind too. So it can be kind of a bit blank. Right? But when you become aware of that stopped mind, then it becomes very beautiful. It's a subtle shift, but it makes the world of difference. Right? So the only way to do that is to keep practicing this witnessing mind, and then sooner or later you catch it. Many people, you see your mind jumping around and you say, okay, well, I managed to have like 3 seconds of peace in 20 minutes of meditating. If I meditate for, a year, I might get up to 10 seconds of peace. And if I go on a meditation retreat, I might get 15 seconds. And if I go on a meditation retreat with an arahant, maybe I'll get 20 seconds of peace. And you're looking at it in a typical, like, Americanized, linear fashion. And, the Western way of looking at the world is in linear lines. If you have X, if you have X1, X2, X3, probably what you're going to get is X4, right? That would be logical. But a Chinese way of looking at the world would be if you have X1, X2, X3, X4 is probably going to come back down again. And it's going to go in a circle or in a cycle. And so because we approach meditation in a linear fashion, and you think, okay, 3 seconds of peace now and 4 seconds of peace if I do it in a year's time, or if I'm with this retreat, it doesn't go like that. The peace or the result of the meditation, these kind of states, are just a very subtle shift to the side. And then you find you're already there. Right? So it's a bit of a trap in our way of thinking that, we throw enlightenment off as a long way down the line, or it's going to take me at least another 1,000 lifetimes before I can do it. And actually it's right there. This is why in Mahayana they teach you're already enlightened. Right? Yeah. It's not a very profitable teaching because then you don't have to pay for your classes. But the reason they teach this is to get you out of this idea of like mayhem here, enlightenment is somewhere way off down the track. Actually, it's just a very subtle shift and suddenly you find yourself there. Okay, so this idea of making it more and more simple, more and more easy. I might tell you about my friend Marissa. She's a Qigong, yoga and Vipassana teacher. She was also a model, photographer, magazine editor. She does a lot of things. And she and I were in Singapore and we were teaching a weekend conference at a nutritionist, and they did some yoga and Qigong and some meditation and for a business group. And quite a lot of the people there had done yoga before. This is a retreat for very successful business people in Sentosa Island. So they were all very capable people. And they've done some of them, especially the women, had done quite a lot of yoga. And so Marissa's trying to teach yoga for the people who hadn't done any as well. And she was teaching the basic asana postures. Dipping dog and standing toad and whatever, I don't know what they are. And what she found was the people that had done the yoga before weren't interested in those basic postures. Like, no, give us something new. We want a new one. I've done that one. I got this much benefit from this one, now I want a new one. And they have this feeling that the harder the posture, the more benefit you're going to get from it. No pain, no gain. So instead of the dipping dog, it's the double inverse granny knot. So that. And all the time she was saying to them, what's important, because she does the Vipassana and the Qigong also, what's important is not your physical posture. What's important is bringing that mindfulness to it. That's how you progress in yoga. Not by doing a new asana, it's by being present for your yoga. That being present, when the mind wanders away, you bring the mind back. Until you know where the mind is and what it's doing. And the people, these women in this group, they didn't like that at all. She's saying, just do the regular dipping dog, the regular, things. But be mindful with it. Practice is mindfulness. Combine these practices and bring it together. And no. And eventually she said, okay, showed them some really impossible kind of stance, and off you do, go and do that against the wall. And then they all went off, and then they came back. Oh, it was so wonderful! I managed to get into the. And Marissa is rolling her eyes because that's not the point that she was teaching. So that's the same that we are doing with all of these, is to remember that all these different teachings are not there to make things more complicated. The experience of putting these into practice should be getting simpler and simpler, easier and easier, lighter and lighter. Right? Now, if the mind is not cooperating, you need to apply energy. Sometimes you really need to, take control of yourself. That's why the concentration or counting the breaths is very good. Take control of yourself. I used to slap myself in the face, like really hard. That was one of my methods. Yeah, I'm not recommending this for anybody. I'll be sitting there like trying to meditate, and the second I close my eyes, just this nebulous thinking that has no form or anything. And then I get really angry with myself, like 10 years as a monk, and this is the result. and try to wake myself up. Well, you need to use these methods sometimes. When you're beginning, you don't really notice quite how bad your mind is, and then the more you meditate, the more you start to realize just how badly trained the mind is. So it can feel like you're getting worse and worse, but it's not. You're getting more and more observant. So sometimes you need to apply methods to bring your attention back. But the better you get at it, the more you do it. Be willing just to let it get very light. I like this image of a man called Jeff Capes, and he was the world's strongest man for about 10 years on the run, and he was English. So we used to love this, There's not many things that the English beat the world at, Darts, snooker, anything you can play in a pub, and the world's strongest man, that's what we had. So the whole country would be glued to the TV for this, big international competition that nobody but us has ever heard of. And he would rip telephone directories and pull trains with his teeth and stuff like this. He wasn't even the biggest guy in the. If you remember, anyone remember him? You don't remember Jeff Capes? You remember him? Okay. And he had a hand like a bunch of bananas. I mean, he just had huge hands for ripping up telephone directories and things. And his favourite pastime and the thing that he did for a living after he stopped being the world's strongest man? He raised budgerigars. Can you imagine these tiny little budgies, little birds, little colourful birds? And he'd hold them in his enormous fist that can crush rocks. And so you see him doing this, and he's so gentle but firm. When he gets the budgie can't escape. So that's kind of how that's a really nice image for how the meditation should be. A very firm, clear, controlled mind that has a very gentle grip. So, with all of these teachings then that we have, the teachings are bringing us back to this very simple point. You have to get this balance between, learning teachings, and I always think that you should go along and experience different teachers and different teachings, and many schools don't. They say this is the way you do it, and for those other ones, they don't know what they're talking about, or they're slow, or they're wrong, or something. I personally, I like to really open my mind out and experience different things. One of my favourite meditation manuals, I was going to say meditation manuals, it's probably a better word for it, right? Meditation. It was a book called The Cloud of Unknowing. Has anyone read that book, The Cloud of Unknowing? 1, 2. Okay, I would recommend this book. I'll put a link up to it on the website. It's a free download. It's a 400 or 500-year-old Christian manual for what you experience when you meditate, and chiefly based around thinking, and what are the right thoughts, wrong thoughts, and how to deal with thoughts. So personally, I think we should open up and experience these different things, different teachings, and every so often there'll be a key that just something clicks into place. You might be doing Aikido, you might be doing yoga, you might be listening to Alan Watts, but every so often there'll be a key that something clicks into place for you. So this balance between taking on board all of these teachings and getting inventive with the practice, and on the other hand making it very simple and gentle. And so we have this balance between these two approaches that you need to find that balance. Now, your experience of being here now, you probably think that you are here in this room listening to me in the Indus restaurant. And I would challenge that. That's not what your actual experience is at all. Right? What your actual experience is sound of the air conditioner, my knee aches, somebody scratching behind me. He said something, oh, that reminds me of such and such. That memory arises. That memory arises, makes you remember another one. That makes you remember another memory. And then you remember, oh, I'm listening to the talk. And you come back listening to the talk. And then you listen to me for another 10 seconds, and then you need to change your posture. And you change your posture, you're thinking about something else. And you're planning your lunch, and then you're back listening to me. This is what's actually happening. You're not sitting here in this room listening to me. That's probably only a small percentage of your conscious experience. Why does it feel like you're sitting here listening to me? Because that's the story that you're telling yourself right now. Out of this mayhem of conscious experience, we have to stitch together a narrative. We have to have some kind of idea or story about ourselves. Right? We have to have some story, narrative that, okay, I'm sitting here listening to this, doing a bit of Buddhism, meditation in Thailand, whatever it is. But actually that's not your experience. And when you turn your attention onto your actual experience, you start to see it's very different to what you think it is. Right? So out of this mayhem, we construct pictures or images, and we give a sense of continuity to it, so that we can continue to relate to, my work, my job, my family, my studies, my interests, etc. There's an interesting video that looked at this. I don't know if anybody's seen the new Skoda advert. Has anybody seen that?
To test
Skoda
just
cars?
how much attention.
Nobody's seen it. You did see that. Okay. I think you may have put the link up. Maybe I saw it. No. Yeah. Skoda are something of a. In England, they were something of a joke car. There was something that came from Russia, and they cost peanuts. But there's a joke like, why do Skodas have rear heated windscreens? To keep your hands warm while you push them. But in recent years, Skodas have become quite good. They've become quite cool. And they're still quite cheap, but they're not bad cars. And they have this great advert. And you have a picture of a Skoda on a street. And they say, this Skoda steals your attention. It's an attention-grabbing car. Which, as you know, it's a bit of a joke, because nobody would consider a Skoda attention-grabbing. And then the screen will go black for a split second, and then you see the same picture again. And then it goes black for a second, and you see the same picture again. And then all the while there's a narrative saying the Skoda's got this engine, and it's got features that will attract your attention, it's got nice wheel rims and blah, blah, blah. It's a narrative going through the story. And every half second or so it will go black, and then the picture will come back up. And then what they do is at the end of the advert, they show you the picture that you're looking at and the picture that you started looking at. Right? Now there's a Skoda here, but everything else on the advert has changed. Colours of the buildings changed, the doors changed, somebody was on a motorbike, then they're on a push bike, and then there's somebody standing in the door, then there's a monkey on the roof. Even the whole colour of the building behind the Skoda changed, and you don't notice any of it. Yeah? You get all the way from here to here, you don't notice any of it. And when they show you at the end, they show you just how much has changed right in front of your eyes. It's absolutely unbelievable, because you swear it was the same picture that you're seeing. Everything on it has changed except the Skoda. This is called change blindness in psychology. And it goes like this, that when you look at something or hear something, actually very little of it is coming into your conscious awareness. Actually, most of it, you just have a generalized story that you're happy with. So one of the experiments, again, you see this on YouTube too. I loved YouTube. was a experiment that they did of people coming in to join a psychology experiment. Students, presumably they're paid a little bit or volunteered. And when they come in, they have to fill out a form. And the person on the desk says, hang on a second, I'll get you the form. And they duck under the desk, they get the form, and they give you the form, and you fill out the form, and then you go into a room. Unbeknown to the person, they've already completed the psychology experiment. Because what happens is the person who they see on the desk, when he dips under the desk to get the form, it's a different guy that gets out. Now, it's the same generalized guy. I mean, if the first one was 7 foot tall and skinny and the next one is short and fat, then you're going to notice. So it's a similar kind of good-looking, well-dressed, smart guy. But that's as far as your conscious attention goes, you see, because you don't pay attention to the features. This is just a regular, smart, good-looking guy, dipped under the desk, got out, same person. And only about 20% of the people actually realize that the person's changed. And usually they go like, and then you just presume that you're wrong. And then they're like, I swear that I knew something had changed. Now all of you here are thinking, I'd notice. You wouldn't. Only 20% of you would even notice the change. And that would probably be an accident. You probably walked in and saw the shirt and thought, oh, I bought a shirt like that last week. That's why you noticed that the second guy who stands up is wearing a different shirt. So it would probably be accidental that you even notice. So we actually see and hear and understand a lot less than we think we do, but we create a story that gives us this sense of continuity. I get the same thing when I get in taxis and when I meet people out on the street and they come running up to me and they go, oh, it's so nice to see you. No, you've got me mixed up with Ajahn Jayasaro. Yeah, that was it. You're not him. No. This goes on and on, hundreds of times. I get in a taxi. Oh, I've read one of your books. It was Ajahn Jayasaro. Why? We're both good-looking, handsome. Change blindness. This is close enough. So your experience is not as continuous as you would like to think it is. Your experience is always jumping around from one thing to another thing to another thing. The actual teaching in Buddhism, the Buddha said, all things are impermanent. This is not difficult to understand. Okay? Anybody can see the trees live and die, the buildings come and go, the weather changes, the season changes. It's not even hard to see that this body is impermanent because it's young and then it gets older, its teeth turn yellow, its hair turn grey, and the back becomes crooked as a roof rafter. I love this kind of imagery. This is the actual sutta. He said, so over a period of 100 years, you can see this body is impermanent. He said, but much harder than that is to see that this mind is impermanent. Interesting. And yet, this mind, in the sutta, this mind arises as one thing and ceases as another. Just like a monkey swinging through a forest will grab hold of one branch, let go, and grab hold of another branch, let go, and grab hold of another. He said, even so, this mind arises as one thing and ceases as another. This is where the original phrase came of the monkey mind. But people think the monkey mind is when my mind's jumping around. Actually, the monkey mind was the description of how consciousness works. Not just your experience, but how consciousness actually works. So your conscious experience is always leaping from one thing to another thing to another thing. That's why I say you're not sitting here in this room listening to me. You're having 100 different experiences every minute, and your conscious mind is flitting between these experiences. The pain in your back, the pain in your knee, the cold on your arm, the fly landing in your ear, the sound of the air conditioner, the sound of the staff coming in and making drinks and things behind you or whatever. And your attention will run to it, and then your attention will come back. But if there was nothing salient in the features of the thing that you looked at, you won't remember it. So it gives you the impression that there's a continuity in your mind. Right? So I'd like to do this little experiment now. If you can all close your eyes. You're not meditating yet. Don't get into meditation yet. Just close your eyes firmly. And I want you to tell me with your eyes keeping your eyes closed, I want you to tell me what was the colour of the bag next to me on my left-hand side.
Beige.
Someone says beige. Anybody else? Haven't got a bag? You've opened your eyes. Keep your eyes closed. Anybody else? What was the colour of my bag? You've been looking at me for 30 minutes. Okay. No, the bag next to me. What else is on the table? Keep your eyes closed. What else is on the table where I'm sitting? Some notes, microphone, phone, asana, sound system, cushion. You see, you're using your brain, you're not using your memory. You're thinking, what is likely to be on my table? You're not actually calling up that image of what was there. Okay? So nobody noticed the brown box. You can open your eyes now. Here was my bag, by the way. And I deliberately didn't bring my yellow bag today. If I brought my yellow bag, more people would have noticed it. Anybody see the box? It's been right there in front of you, and you think that you're sitting there watching this, and yet you're not noticing most of the things. Sorry? Because you were listening, right. So in actual fact, the attention will jump around from between different things. But the narrative that we create in our head is the story of what we're doing. I'm listening to you. But your actual experience is not just of listening to me. Your attention, your consciousness has been flitting around. But if nothing that jumps out that is salient enough, salient means noticeable enough, then you will forget that experience. But you will remember listening to me because I'm salient. Okay? And this is the process that the Buddha described. He said, when you turn your attention to your mind, this is the actual experience, jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing. So in the meditation, we're trying to get away from our stories about the world, the way that we understand the world and what we think that we're doing, and come back to the actual experience of things arising and ceasing. Things coming into my attention and going out of my attention. And what happens is when something comes up, normally you think of like my health. I have good health or bad health. I've got a... Yesterday I went for a tetanus shot and they talked me into having 3 tetanus shots somehow. So I can think about my health. But I'm really thinking about the story, my health. What's really happening is, if I pay attention, is this subject of my health had just come up. Half a second ago, it wasn't there. It wasn't in my conscious attention. When that subject comes up, there'll be an attraction to think about it. Now, the attraction may be low or may be great. So you might hear the staff come and behind you and go get something from the bar, but the attraction to pay attention to that is very small. Right? It's part of a story. I'm in the Indus. There'll be people getting things behind me. so you can write it off. Okay? But the experience as a meditator is not our stories about things. That's how we think we live. That's how we think we are. As a meditator, what you want to be is firmly based in the present moment. So then things will come up. It's what we talk about, something coming up. It means that you are sitting here fine, and then suddenly a snake's head appears instead of someone else. Like, well, I like that, or I dislike it. Then I'm going to think about it. And when I think about it, I'm going to get into wanting. I want to get rid of it, or I want more of it, or I want to change it. Right? When you start to think, I want this, I don't want that, I'm going to change it, and all this craving arises, you get this sense of a person, of being. And it's this sense of being that is suffering. Right? That's an interesting statement. It's an interesting statement because can you suffer on something that you're not paying conscious attention to? Right? If you have an aching back, right now I have a aching knee. Is my aching knee going to hurt the whole time? It's only when I call it into consciousness or it arises into my conscious attention, then I suffer over it. But if I move my conscious attention somewhere else, I don't suffer over it. This is why, like last week, it was freezing cold in here, and many of you said, yes, turn the air conditioning on. I didn't notice because I'm too busy talking. Right? So I simply don't notice that. Right? Change blindness. We are unaware of most of the things in our field of experience. So, as an example of this, there's my friend Johnny Ryman at school, and Johnny Ryman had a big lawn in his house, and at this one particular time there were moles digging up his lawn, and every morning his family would come out and there'd be these molehills in the middle of his nice big lawn, his parents' nice big lawn. So the parents laid a trap and they caught the mole, or one of them, and killed it. Presumably it died in the trap. And Johnny Ryman thought it would be a very good idea to bring this mole to school and scare all the girls with it. And this was a Friday. And I remember distinctly that this was a Friday, because I paid conscious attention to the day. I remember distinctly that this was a Friday because Johnny Ryman left the mole in his desk all over the weekend. And when we went back to school on the Monday and we opened the door of that room, like the stench was discombobulating. You know that word? I mean, it was disorientating. You like... And so, of course, we all scream and we go running off, and like we're not going into that classroom. And then the teacher comes along and she decides she's not going into the classroom either. And the headmaster comes along and goes marching into the classroom, and like I guess he must have used his nose to sniff out where the mole was because it's in the desk. And he comes walking out with this dead mole, and he's right, in you go. We're like, we can't go in there, it stinks. And he said, you all got to go in and you've got to do your class. And eventually he forced all of us, including the very reluctant teacher, Mrs. Tullock, her name was, into the room. And then we obviously opened up the windows and the doors, and after like 10 minutes the stench had disappeared and we got on with the class. At break time we all leave and go out and play in the playground and have our free bottle of milk that you used to get in those days, when milk was considered healthy, so healthy they gave it to you at school. And then when we went back into the class, it still stank, right? Still had this incredible stench. So what had happened? Why was it not smelling while we were in there? Point is, you get used to it. You've got this narrative story. Okay, there's a dead mole, there's a smell, we've opened the windows, end of story. And when you end the story, you end the experience of the smell. Actually, the smell was still there like a week later. It's quite remarkable. So, the lesson to draw from this story is that our experience doesn't really depend upon the world around us. Our experience depends upon the story that we are telling ourselves of our experience. And when you pay close attention in meditation, the stories start to drop away. Because when you're just breathing in and out, you haven't got time for stories. So your attention starts to shift back to what is actually happening. And what is actually happening is something pops up. I think about it. It's important or unimportant. Unimportant drops away, and then I forget about it. And I forget that I even paid attention to it. If it comes up and it's important, then it starts to create what we call contacting, passa, or a conscious experience, or a feeling of myself having this experience, which is a delusion. Actually, it's just something coming up into conscious awareness. Then creates feeling, creates craving, and creates this whole sense of self, which creates the stories. Okay? And what we do in the meditation is we're reversing this process, turning this process around. We have all this craving, and then we give up the craving. Then we come back, we have this feeling of liking or disliking. We give up the feeling of liking or disliking. We come back, we have this sense of contacting with something, just a raw conscious, contact with something, and we give that up, and we're getting back further and further until eventually you lose this whole sense of yourself, but you're still there, you're still present, but you're just awake and you're at peace. The mind and the body are very bright at this point. We might call it the Zen spot. I like to call it a Zen spot. So this is what we're doing with the meditation. I can give you another example. My friend, the professor, I'm going to call him. And the professor is a good friend of mine, but he's very animated. And I have great fun with him. Because anything that I throw at him, I watch this whole process of being start to arise. And I'll go around to his house and say, "It's nice to see you." It's, "Oh, it's so nice to see you," because we were good friends. And then he'd be like, "Oh, it's so nice to see you." And then I'd say, "Yeah, boy, those boats sure are noisy outside your house." He'd, "Oh, it's so great living here, but I can't stand those boats." And he'd be in this whole, like, his face would crease up, and, "Oh, these boats and Thai people, they don't put silencers on their exhaust on their boats." And then, okay. And then I'll say, "It's lovely weather, isn't it? Oh, I'm so glad I'm not in Australia. It's so cold." And now he's all beaming and happy again. And then I'd say, "What about your latest project?" He said, "You can't believe what happened to me." And he'd be launching into this story of indignance. He's a very indignant person. And then I'd say, "Wow, his wife would bring the food." I'd say, she makes such good food." And he said, "Oh, it's such a blessing having her here, and she looks after me so well." And now he's all loving. And I'm flipping him with a remote control. I'm just like, beep, 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 beep. I can, whatever mind state I want out of him, I just beep. But he doesn't have that experience. He has the experience of sitting there talking to me, because that's his narrative story. That's the story that he's telling himself that he's doing. But that's not what's really happening. What's really happening is he's bouncing off the walls according to where I direct him with my remote control. So this is the process that you want to track. And as you do meditation, you'll start to notice now that something comes up. We use this word, comes up. Meditation, the thing comes up and propels me into this whole chain reaction. When you catch it, there's no need to go into this chain reaction anymore. Okay? One thing at a time. That's the only thing that is real, is that thing that's arising right there. Then you start to see this consciousness, not in terms of your stories, but you see this consciousness as this bubbling, foaming mess. You're like, wow, that actually is my mind. That actually is my experience, but I didn't notice it. the only way out is in, and the further into it you go, the less you find yourself being remote controlled by these thoughts and these memories, and the more you have this sense of yourself independent of all this stuff that's happening. So earlier on, Alan Watts was talking about the writing on the page. He says you don't notice the page. You don't notice a piece of paper on which he's drawn a picture. You only notice the picture. So with this kind of meditation, you're starting to notice this sense of yourself separate to all of this content, because the content has less power to push you around. I'm going to finish with a story of a classic story that describes in many different cultures. Some stories go right across cultures. This is a very classic story we find in many, many different cultures, including Buddhism, of a person who hears about enlightenment. And so they jump in their horse and carriage and they find out about the guru. They jump into their horse and carriage and they travel for a while. But gurus are not usually on the main road, not usually in Bangkok, because only me does that. No, for a good guru you've got to travel. And so at some point you've got to give up the carriage because there's no more roads. And you just jump on the horse. And then the horse will take you so far, but eventually, the horse can't climb up the cliffs and scramble along the path, so you abandon the horse. You use your legs. And eventually you get, you climb up the cliff face and you're getting closer to the guru, and to be respectful you have to take off your shoes. And eventually you sit with the guru with your shoes off, somewhere high up in the mountain. Yeah. So the meaning of this story is the horse and carriage. The carriage is your livelihood, your family is your life. Okay? You've got to drop that. Then you get onto the horse, and the horse represents your thinking. Now, I can talk more about that if you want, if you have any questions about this, why a horse represents thinking. But for the moment, trust me, a horse represents thinking. So after a while, you have to give up that thinking too. That thinking that makes you travel. Now you're relying on your legs. Legs always represent your ability. Right? This is why Forrest Gump wore stilts on his legs, because that was the time before he'd found his ability in the world. Okay? Again, if you want to talk about any of these images, I can give you lots of examples. Then finally you take off your shoes, and shoes always represent action. So taking off your shoes means then you give up that action. So you're dropping your life, you're dropping your thoughts, still have to apply energy and effort. Then you even drop the energy and the effort, and eventually you stop and you're not doing anything at all. And that is where you meet the guru. Okay? So you don't have to go to the Himalayas for this. This is an inward journey, not an external journey. A lot of people still mix that up. They still go searching for a great teacher, not realizing that teacher is at the end of the inward path. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and if there's any... Wow, sorry, I've been talking much. It's because I had to turn my phone off, and I can't see how far I am. Are there any questions?